I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new How to Bass. Now, this one is not, there's no sound preview for this. I mean, there might be, I might put a preview at the beginning after the fact, but this is more like an exploratory explanation of some stuff to do with FM8 and Citrus, FM in general. So as I said on Wednesday, I talked about Far Too Loud's bass production, and he had a video up where he mentioned how he made the main bass in FM8 for the track 600 Years. Now I'm going to do the super, like, not even processed basic version of what he did, and I will explain why it's cool, and I'll explain how you can do it in Citrus if you care, because if you see what I do in FM8, it's pretty much the end of the tutorial. So it's one oscillator FMing another, and also going out because I guess so. That's what he did. But I'm gonna turn max on everything, and then I'm gonna change E to eighth formant. I'm also gonna change the root note to way higher. This is a very important sound. And the reason why this is very important is because if, like me, when you're super duper trying to recreate a bass and you listen to the guy that made the bass a lot, listen to the sound a lot, then that kind of harmonic presence in this sound in the modulation should be extremely familiar to you. And this is for a couple of reasons. If you watch a Far Too Loud video, you're going to see that, like, oh, that's what he did, so that's why it's familiar. But why it's familiar to me is because that sound sounds like the carrier to a lot of vocoded or talkboxy related sounds. And or even better, it just sounds like just the sound that's been, like, you process it enough, and eventually you get a distorted version of this that I actually thought was vocoder related. And the reason why I thought so is because that kind of glassy artifact sounds to me a lot like vocoder artifacts, like a low bandwidth kind of glassy things that happens. And so whenever I hear a sound that's like based in this sort of thing, I think it's a vocoder sound. And boy, was I wrong. So what's happening here? Why is this a thing? Well, we're modulating the output operated by the eighth formant. In FM8, that's pretty much all you need to know. That's what's happening. But we're going to talk about what the eighth formant even is. So let's get rid of F and actually just output E to itself, to just out. We get a sound. You're pretty much out, right? This is your max level. So if you look at an EQ of this sound, we get kind of an interesting look. We can see that the main beat of the sound is obviously up here somewhere, but we still have bass presence and a lot of high frequency shenanigans going on in the sound. And more importantly, when we hear it, despite obviously being a higher frequency sound, it still sounds like the root note that you're hitting. In fact, when we look at the waveform analysis, actually, I'll open up a wave candy just to be fun. Oscilloscope. What note is this I'm pressing? E. Here's a fun thing you can do with the update function in Wave Candy. You can right-click it, and you can go to E, and it will stay in. All right, so let's look at this. Here we have the kind of the waveform that we're looking at. What information can we get from this? Well, this is the frequency, and if you look at here, the period never actually changes, so it's still the same tone the whole time, but it loses volume. It starts at higher volume and goes to no volume. And this volume increase and decrease changes with the period. In fact, the whole period ends a very large difference from, this higher frequency action. And that sounds to me a lot like ring modulation. I mean, it sounds like, like that description sounds like the result of ring modulation. So let's go into Citrus. When I just press a note, I get that. That sounds roughly like the same high frequency sound. So let's start with that. So we want to FM that, or RM that rather. So let's operator 1 is basically the output here. So let's go to RM matrix, because you can do that in Citrus. I'm going to RM it by 2. As being RM'd by the same high frequency tones, we don't want that. We want the fundamental tone, which we know from just using basic Citrus, that level is at 0.25. That's the same root note level. That's funky. And the reason why it's funky is because RM doesn't actually work in the same way that FM does in terms of its interpretation. I gotta drink something. That's better. In terms of its interpretation of the waveform, it doesn't actually do the same thing. FM, when it interprets the waveform, I actually talk about this in 2 tutorials. I have how to base 6, which is FM from the ground up for Citrus, and how to base 50, which is FM from the ground up for FM8. So if this is a topic that interests you, I go in huge detail. I'm going to kind of touch on it right now, but that's where all the main information comes from. Anyway, point being, FM, when you modulate something by a waveform in another operator, like at first it kind of sounds like it's doing what a sine wave should do. Pitch goes up, smooths out, comes back down, smooths out, goes back up. But if you go to like a triangle wave, suddenly the pitch is solid, and then it goes down, and then it goes to the lower pitch, and then it goes to the higher pitch, and there's no in-between motion. It's just there, 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 there. Why? That's behavior that sounds an awful lot like a square wave, but this is a triangle wave. What's up with that? Well, this is because in an FM, the pitch change is determined by the change in slope of the waveform, which for a sine wave more or less corresponds with the shape of the sine wave. But for a triangle wave, we see that the wave's slope is always constant. It changes from one to the other max. So it goes, slope is 1, slope is -1. Slope is 1, slope is -1. So it's 1, -1. Top pitch, lower pitch. No change in between. Kind of thing. That's also why when you FM something by something like a saw wave, you're basically FMing something by a click, because it goes negative, 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 negative. And then square waves are just nada. Click, 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 click everywhere. So that's why that happens. But in RM world, RM is basically an oscillator. Although it works kind of like an LFO, only fucking fast. Because, like, audio. Like, that's what? Like 1,000 hertz? That's really freaking fast. Anyway, so the way that we want to interpret this for RM is that it goes positive, and then it goes negative, and then the center is no amplitude. There's no amplitude. It actually works by amplitude. So then we have, so basically you go volume increase, volume decrease, volume increase negative phase, volume increase, decrease negative phase. And then that's, so basically this is actually modulating increase in volume twice. So we could go a lower octave, or we could use these TX shapes. Now, in FM8, you have access to these shapes based on preset ones that mimic the waveforms that are in like Yamaha DX7 and stuff like that. But this is useful for RM because this first one up here is half, which means that it's only positive amplitude. And then if we go to what would normally be a saw wave, we can kind of recreate this shape that we're seeing in the wave candy here, which is positive amplitude and positive up, and then down to 0, and then it goes back up. Pretty freaking close. There's some tiny frequency change in the FM8, which you can kind of approximate by putting little dots in the oscillator window in the right places, but for the most part, that's not necessary. So right now, operator 1 is basically outputting the 8th formant. And then, of course, if I change the pitch of operator 1, no matter what the pitch is, we still get the feeling of the original fundamental tone because of the RM happening. So then if we turned off operator 1 and then output operator 3 and then modulated that by operator 1, if operator 3 is at the fundamental tone, which is 2.5, we get this. because we're in the RM matrix, and that's not what we want to do. We want to be in the FM matrix. Voila. That's what we wanted. Now, other interesting things include this notion of like what this eighth format represents additively. And what do I mean by additively? Well, the way I discovered how to do this and what is actually happening, and also what I ended up using for the carrier in the sound design tutorial this week on Wednesday, is because I experimented a little bit with FM8's eighth format. So I recorded it right here, and then I actually cut it up, zoomed in, and I grabbed a single cycle of the eighth format. I just very loosely did it, and I wasn't, super duper careful about it. So let's go to, whoa. Actually, this whole thing could just go away. The wave candy is no longer necessary. Doop. So let's go to default. Bam. And operator 1, I'm going to click and drag and drop this into the thingy, and it's going to additively resynthesize the waveform to the best of its abilities. Fun fact about Citrus, if you drop anything into the operator window, it'll attempt to resynthesize it as a single cycle waveform. If it is a single cycle waveform, it'll do a pretty good job. But you could drop a whole song in there, and it'll come up with a waveform that kind of looks like the song's waveform. It'll just sound really weird. And that's a lot of fun. But look at this sort of thing. This looks a lot like the EQ presence of FM8. And it also correctly resynthesizes the high frequency elements over here. But and then the phase is different. It basically tried to arrange it in such a way that it arrived at this same position as it did originally. Now, this is operator 1. So if I modulate operator 2 by this, operator 2 being the correct fundamental tone, we get the result that we got on FM8. And we did the same thing. But this is, the reason why I showed how to actually recreate the fundamental RM thing the first time is because that's basically what I arrived at. Is, okay, well, I need to find a way to do this that doesn't involve recording another synth to create the same sound. So that's why I did that. But this gave me very interesting ideas because it has the fundamental tone in it, but it's very quiet. In fact, the present tone is this guy, but this being here, if I modulate another tone by it, it still sounds like the fundamental tone, even if I change the pitch. It gets kind of weird, but it kind of works. So I experimented. Let's go back to default. Let's say these are both fundamental tones. All right, and then I created a shape just manually, just boink, boink. Boy, that's a plethora of interesting sounds, isn't it? It's also very harsh, but this sound was actually what I used as a basis for the carrier in the FTL attempt, the vocoder bass, on Wednesday. That's how this is the process by which I arrived at this sound. And what's cool about this is that this gives very interesting harmonics to a carrier sound, because this is the reason why I'm doing all this is because this is like this is a bass root of a lot of sounds that you hear used in things, and I just never knew how to really achieve this sort of thing or why it did what it did, and now it makes a lot more sense. So and I also think it's also very interesting, especially by how Citrus's RM stuff works and how FM8 does the harmonic thing. Like that was very eye-opening for me, kind of deal. Like that's the kind of stuff that's what I said on Facebook about how FM8 like certain aspects of how it works, makes a lot of things make a lot of sense now. Because that waveform was available in FM8, lots of people based their sound design around easy access and stuff like that, and it created lots of very interesting ideas. So kudos to NI for designing such a cool thing, and kudos to people like FTL for taking advantage of it in very interesting ways. I hope I can come up with some neat stuff in the future, but for now, this tutorial was really a very kind of like a information heavy one. It wasn't really about any sound in particular, but it was about sort of neat stuff, I think. I think what I'll do is I'll cut this up and put it in the beginning of the video. FM Reese's. Yeah, so if you have any questions about any of this, let me know and I'll attempt to answer them. And as usual, have a nice day.